Evet, konuşmacılarımızı
Okay, I would like to invite the speakers.
2023
In this session, we will be discussing
yılında 20 gigawatt
2023 targets. What should we do for the target of 20 gigawatts by 2023? Welcome. The session will be moderated by Mr. Director General Yusuf Yazar. Mr. Director, you may take the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. And you know that according to the strategy paper, there are some targets for 2023, also covering renewables. Among those targets, there are two major targets that are relevant to our discussions today. The first one is a rather general target. By 2023, the electricity generation with a reference to the renewable share by minimum 30%. Or there is another very ambitious target, particularly uttered for the wind energy. The share of the wind for generation of electricity is set as 20,000 megawatts by 2023. Now, as you know, we have launched some incentives in 2005 that were started after the enactment of the law on renewables. And then we received the first applications for licensing, so the process has been completed. But I have to say that the wind energy has become a remarkable progressive energy resource in Turkey. Also, through the end of 2009, there was an incentive for encouraging the contribution of the local share in the equipment. So it's not just about the setting up of electricity generation power plants, but it was beyond that, the use of clean technologies for electricity generation was used as a tool for also localization of the technology. So there have been many efforts in that direction within the process. And I have to say that we have taken a certain path in that direction, as discussed thoroughly in the morning sessions. And as you would appreciate, of course, we are concentrating on wind, but that is the case also for the other renewables. There are some incentives in terms of localization of the particular equipment and pieces and parts, mainly the blades and some of the parts of the turbines. But I have to say we have taken a distance in that direction. But on the other hand, we have to admit that the actors of the market do have concerns. 20,000 megawatts of a target is quite ambitious, but can that be somehow underestimated? Because we have a potential of growth, even if the development goes on as the current case. By 2023, will we be in the position of achieving that target of 20 gigabytes of electricity production from wind energy? That's a reasonable question to ask, of course. But on the other hand, maybe we can discuss with the relevant counterparts their views as to avoiding the obstacles of a timely achievement of 20 gigabytes of the target. But on the other hand, we should be discussing what can be done in accelerating the investments into that direction. And there are some aspects that have been successfully accomplished, some failed. But today we'll be discussing around these aspects. I will be introducing the panelists one by one. I would like to start from Hakan Yıldırım from Siemens. He is the country lead of Siemens Wind Power in Turkey. And I will not have time to read through the CVs, so otherwise that'll be a consumption of time. But I think it would be enough to say that Mr. Yıldırım is country lead of Siemens Wind Power in Turkey. But the question remains the same. I mean, maybe all the panelists would provide their own perspective. What do you think about the progression? How satisfied are you about the current status? And do you think is there a way we can find to accelerate the process? I mean, maybe from your perspectives, you can give us some ideas as to the challenges that you've been facing. And also, what do you think can be done to accelerate the investments through to 2023? Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. Firstly, I would like to extend my regards to all of you. I am the country lead of Siemens of wind power. At the same time, I'm a member of the executive board of the Wind Energy Association of Turkey. I don't have a presentation prepared. I don't have slides. I was criticizing myself as to why I haven't prepared a presentation, particularly after having seen the detailed slides of Ibrahim. I regret it, but I thought our job is thinking about the wind day and night. Therefore, we have so much internalized the existing problems, challenges, situations, and the potential solutions for those problems. I know all the faces. I know all of you, maybe. Therefore, I thought would be useless to make a presentation, but rather I would, as a person who really spends a lot of time and effort thinking about the potential and the current problems, I thought maybe I should spend my time in sharing the experiences we have. About 2.5 months ago, I made a presentation in Hamburg, doing business in Turkey, namely. And then 10 days ago, there was another presentation of mine in the Chinese Wind Power Conference. Therefore, I will just give that perspective because we are the people who are representing Turkey and marketing Turkey abroad. Marketing and market, of course, having said that, should Turkey be only a market for wind? Or should Turkey show its size only as a market around the globe, or should we concentrate more into increasing our added value? So that's another debate. Of course, Turkey is a country that has been providing some incentives for local manufacturing, but it's not obligatory. I mean, there are some examples to that when you go to Morocco, South Africa, Ukraine. In those countries, it's a must. I mean, it's obligatory, 65%, but different percentages of local manufacturing is a prerequisite for you to enter into the market. Otherwise, you cannot. But Turkey preferred to use the incentive mechanism, which I think was the right way to go. Relatively set a lower feed-in tariff, which was criticized at length once, but we have seen that in the last 4 years, a survivable lower feed-in time tariff may also be quite okay for the stakeholders if the stakeholders can survive with it. And the time that has elapsed has already shown that in the markets, of course, where we had much higher prices, they turned upside down. So turning back to the question, should Turkey only be a market? Can we be more? And what should be done to reach the goal of 20 gigawatts by 2023? If you ask me to achieve 20 gigawatts by 2023, the first thing that should be done is to change the question itself. I think we should be rephrasing as to what shall we do to achieve or to reach to 10 or 12 gigawatts by 2023, because in the last 4 or 5 years, Turkey has shown a sustainable development. 500, 600, 700 megawatts of installed capacity can be spoken for Turkey. I mean, bringing it up to 1.5 gigawatts should be the very first target. But doing this, of course, it should be another target, in my opinion, not to be a market alone, because wherever you go, I mean, thousands of kilometers of distances you are trying to move equipment, and this is not the way to make wind competitive, because especially one element for wind is to make it more competitive against coal, for instance. And for being able to do that, it's a must to be local. I mean, this market cannot be competitive if you just try to move one tower like 1,500 kilometers away. Turkey achieved that, I think. I mean, I'm not seeing any internet or foreign tower being used in any of the project, but it's not about nationalism. It's about making this sector more competitive against the others. But for the blades, for instance, it's okay. There are very nice investments for manufacturing blades, but within a time of 1 week, moving the parts from one location to the other, it's just a mold that we're speaking of. I mean, I'm not underestimating. It's always very important. But what is the degree of the added value to the country? I'm always asking this question. Taking a look at the other components, for instance, nacelle. Within nacelle, there are 8, 9 components that are separated, and each component is given small incentives each. But is it what the rest of the world is doing at the moment? The major manufacturers. I mean, is each component really being manufactured that way? For instance, at Siemens, our factory in Denmark is an assembly factory. There are about 8,000 components in a turbine, and therefore you shouldn't be in the position of claiming as a country that all the components should be local. It should be a competitive manufacturing, and that's the path to follow. Therefore, my recommendation in the direction of 20 gigabytes is always the nacelle assembly, because when we're speaking about assembly here, we tend to underestimate. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's 2 pieces that will be screwed in, and it's no big deal. But when you bring in that assembly, the manager of the supply chain of the factory will also be in the picture, and then they will try to look for options. For instance, can we localize the screws? Therefore, subsectors will be flourishing. Therefore, at the end of the day, it'll be to the benefits of the wind industry. Why? Because that will make the wind sector more attractive when compared to the competitors. Some will be originating from Denmark, maybe the others from local, and some from maybe other countries. So this will end up with a win-win situation. Yes, on the way to 20 gigabytes, it is roughly the wind projects will be amortizing itself with like 10 years, 12 years, but after having worked for the equipment for so long of a period, that is really important for Turkey as for other countries. But what really matters is 20, 30, 40 gigawatts. I think Turkey has about a potential of 48 gigawatts. And on that direction, the added value, as long as we increase the added value, we will make wind energy more favorable, cheaper, a better solution. One solution to achieve this, which I think we also have been discussing this with Yusuf's team, and I know that they're doing hard work, but turning back to the nacelle assembly, I think I have to highlight this, that it's really doable. There will be a lot of impacts to the buy industry. Let me give you an example. Previously, incentives were not given for the towers, $0.6. This then was subdivided, tower plus the foundation bolts, anchorage, or the other hardware. That was quite a wise attempt. Anchorage is 1 to 2 meters of a rod, an iron rod. So there is nothing particular about its manufacturing. But if you do not give incentives in that direction, what happens is in the headquarters there are hundreds of thousands of supplied items. Therefore, you're just using scale economies when you're using a few suppliers. But at the end of the day, the raw material is just known, and it's not a huge advantage that you can expect for the cost because workmanship is lower relatively, so it's not very easy to assign this to local manufacturers. Is it possible? Yes, of course. But speaking on the large scale, sometimes it is a disadvantageous situation to move from international to local. But if you just divide it into two, formalize this as a support mechanism to preserve competitiveness, that anchorage can be manufactured locally. You would just hire a company based in Mersin, Adana, Antalya, local company. In other words, there will be a support that will be raised to the wind industry in Turkey, and the scale will be caught up in Turkey. In other words, the wind power plant can be more economical. This is this one example. Just to wrap up what I've been trying to say, the two things are important, in my opinion. First, we should be setting realistic targets now, because eventually the cases by 2023 will have a total installed capacity of 10 gigawatts, and the panels will still be discussing around 20 gigawatts. I think it's now time that all the stakeholders discuss around this target as a realistic target, I think. The second thing is I think all kinds of localization attempts by Yusuf and his team would be supported by us. Competitiveness will be also aiming at reducing the cost of the electricity generated by wind. Thank you.
Evet, biz teşekkür ederiz.
Thank you very much. Speaking on my behalf, I would not think that it's time to just take down the target of 20 gigawatts down. On the contrary, maybe I would be arguing if we can just exceed that target. We still have about 10 years, another decade to go. Maybe we can discuss about the measures that would eventually trigger investments. So this 20 gigawatts, I think, can be used as a leverage to trigger new investments. That may also be used as a leverage for triggering ourselves. The target of 20 gigawatts is on the table, but still we're achieving 3,500 megawatts, and we're pleased to have small amounts of an increase in that. What happens if it's just the contrary? If you just bring down your targets, I think we would hinder ourselves from doing our best. We would hamper in that direction our attempts of increasing that target, even if we're not aware of that. So I think preserving that target is important for us. Maybe basing ourselves onto that target, although it doesn't look realistic for the moment, you would never know what the coming years would bring along. Therefore, we should, I think, do our best in accomplishing that target rather than bringing it down. Now, about assembly, I personally think, and that's true, that the assembly idea is really valuable. I agree with you, Hakan, about that. But as to how we can make use of that, as to how we can move into that direction, I think that is another debate. I mean, we should be concentrating on, as we are doing, as always. This is maybe a new window of discussion. Probably will need some further elaboration. If you just share your opinions with us further into our discussions, that would be quite useful. The next speaker of the session will be Ibrahim Erden, Business Development Manager from Enerjisa Energy. And the same questions are posed to you, Mr. Erden.
Bir yardımcı olur musunuz? Bir saniye. Bakabilir misiniz? Evet, öncelikle iyi akşamlar.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and panelists, distinguished panelists, and all of you for staying so late. Hakan made a wonderful introduction into the discussion, I think. That is showing the personal experiences, and that is about being realistic, whether we can really accomplish the target of 20 gigawatts by 2023 under the umbrella of the Turkish Wind Energy Association. And of course, a lot of private initiatives. There have been a lot of joint work into setting that target, including the manufacturers, advisors, other stakeholders. So I have to say that the outcomes will be and have been reflected into a report with the contribution of all the stakeholders and will be published as a publication of TWEC. And it was presented to all of the stakeholders, all the investors. I will try to follow a similar approach in this presentation, and I will start by asking another question. Can we achieve 20 gigawatts by 2023 is one question, but okay, if we achieve 20 gigawatts in 2023, we pay the money, and some people come in, do the engineering work, do the operational work. They do the supervising, investment, and everything. They're operating. We have the money. We take all the risk, but there is no benefit. Is it our dream? No. I mean, that shouldn't be our dream. I think Hakan made a wonderful introduction, bringing up the perspective of a multinational giant. I think that's the prerequisite of speaking of common sense, and I would like to continue from where he stopped. Is it only a 20 gigawatts target by 2023? Is it really about the target of 20 gigawatts? I will very briefly speak who we are, and other than that, I will just try to elaborate on my opinion on that. Enerjisa, currently, you would know, as a company, probably all of you would know the company. We have three power plants in terms of the wind. We have some processes, and we keep growing. And hopefully, in the coming years, in Turkey, as in the other fields, we will continue to be one of the largest players in wind in Turkey. And we try to make use of the resources of the company, and we will try to do it in the way that will be to the best benefits of the country. I hope we'll be successful. Now, at the outset, I would like to just ask a question. In the energy mix or energy portfolio of Turkey, is wind really important? There are, of course, some aspects that we've been discussing, the current deficit, so on and so forth. But naming it, this is an environmental friendly investment, and it's not as the conventional production technologies. By using a small land, you have the potential of generating a significant amount of energy. At the same time, there is the local impact that can be used without without paying for the fuels or for anything else. You have an indigenous source, so it's important for the supply security. I made a calculation. It's currently 3,500 megawatts, and Turkey has just got rid of about 1,100, 1,200 megawatts of the capacity of the natural gas. So we have avoided purchasing that natural gas. Probably that has saved us into buying more natural gas. In terms of the market dynamics, of course, it's really important and relevant, I think, for the discussion. For the primary energy resources, including conventionals like the coal, fuel, and all the other resources, we now have something that's self-proven, that may have the potential of being an individual investment item. So it's complementary also. Plus, it's economical. There are many feasible potentials for the wind. You know, hydroelectricity is important for Turkey, but it has seasonal effects, and wind can also be complementary to hydro. If you think them one after the other, there is a second complementary aspect. One is just more productive in spring, and the other in the other seasons. So economical potential is quite high for wind in Turkey. As you know, Turkey is accepted by everyone, is has a very high potential for wind. Particularly the western coast of Turkey has a strong wind potential. Therefore, that potential, I think, should be utilized. Recently, many things have happened in Turkey, and without just being fixed into the figures, I would like to show you the chart as a reference, and this is known to you, 3,500 megawatts, we keep saying. By the end of this year, it will probably be around, and we've been discussing with various investors, Turkey will be reaching 900 megawatts. If you take a look at the improvement, it really is an exponential, I think, growth. Would that pace continue the same way? That's a question mark. Can we reach 20 gigawatts by 2023? We'll see. I mean, based on what we've seen so far, we will be, of course, basing our forecasts to the future. So how does the future look like? If we keep improving like that, what is the time to reach 20 gigawatts? If it's roughly 800 megawatts as an annual addition, so if we go further, it's 2035. If it's 1,200, then 2028. So for reaching 20 gigawatts by 2023, we need to improve by, we have to get an additional input of every year 1,900 megawatts, which is not very low. I mean, it's important to achieve 1,900, but I don't think that it's really very easy to increase that level quite speedily. In the morning session, Mr. Danish Minister informed us as to how wind has become an incremental part of the energy in Denmark, said that we have realized the significance of wind after the oil crisis. So after being shaken by really an important crisis, we were aware of that, but still that technology was available in that particular country even long before that. Therefore, the major crisis in the 1970s changed the way that they were doing business. Their energy markets, their energy technologies, after that crisis changed totally. So we are speaking about 40%, and by 2030 it'll be 80%, 100%. So the targets may be as such. So some things may be realistic, speaking of the figures. We can, of course, make different comparisons about the size of the country, so on and so forth, but it's not absolutely necessary for Turkey to be 100%. But I think that's a wonderful example as to how we can be ambitious in our targets. Either we're going to update this or make a reduction into the target, or we'll make more investments into the future. We'll try to remove the barriers, and we'll try to do our best in achieving that target by 2023. Otherwise, you can be too slow, I mean, catching up with this target. With the best scenario, I have to say, it's 2030. So it's a contradiction. So we have to do something, and we need some new leaps forward, I think. All the stakeholders are aware of this because we're holding these congresses sessions, we're working on it. So all the, I think, stakeholders are quite aware of what they need to do to improve that joint platform so that we can improve ourselves into that target, which I find quite remarkable. So basically speaking, if we want to make the market larger in size, we may ask some questions, but the questions may be sought from the answers. if we can accomplish all of the surrounding requisites, we will have a better market, a better growing market. One by one, I will not get into the details of these, but maybe I'll recap on some of them. What really matters at the end of the day is to have a sound legal infrastructure and regulations on top of it. And it's not just about the energy markets. It's not just about the energy. It just is about all the related markets. It's just all about improving the all relevant processes, including finances, including banking sector. Of course, there might be some links with mining. If there is any contact with mining, of course, we need improvements about mining. Like, for instance, in mine fields, if we have underground mining, we may use the wind on the ground. Or there might be some improvements, if necessary, about the import and export regimes. So that's a complete picture that we have to look into, so that we can take further and faster steps into the future. But other than that, maybe for the future steps, there's another thing that might be important: the legal background, the legal infrastructure. And Turkey, I know, has been spending huge efforts into that direction. Last year, we had the law into the sector, and it's been improved. But there is one thing that might be a gap. In 2007, there was a process of receiving applications for licensing, and there was a long time which nothing happened. So these gaps are quite long distances that might be interpreted as an indefinite time for the investors, which they might prefer other fields for their investors. So which one is more profitable, which is not? They're not making that calculation. If years are passing, of course, no one would wait for a profitable business if it'll take some 5-10 years of time to start. I mean, considering the situation in Istanbul, most of the investors, particularly I'm saying this for construction, if you're going to invest into Istanbul, the scale of the companies having invested into construction sector in Istanbul, could easily have invested into other industries. I mean, instead of waiting, they've shifted their investment into construction business. So as Hakan discussed and has fairly explained, we need to encourage investments. We need some subsidizing mechanisms to attract more investments, and we need to improve what's already there. The local content, I think, has been an important aspect into contributing. I think thanks to that, we have 2 blade factories and 5 other tower factories now functioning in Turkey. In addition to that, there were some of the suppliers who are supplying other components to the tower. I think into that value chain, we can get more shares into that value chain by way of these subsidies. If we can accomplish this, there is something, of course, even maybe more important. We're always expecting things from the government, but we need foreseeable and competitive marketplace, which is not very open to surprises. We should more or less have the chance of forecasting the electricity prices 5 years from now. Therefore, the public should be getting into a less active position in the electricity market, which has been the case recently, which I think is quite pleasing. And also on the generation side, we need to have, of course, except for the strategic aspects, we need to lessen the share of government or the state in the production or in the generation aspect as well. So if we can achieve all of these subtitles, then we would have a competitive, fully competitive marketplace where we can move on from. This slide I don't want to get into very much because we've already mentioned those, but just one aspect that I'd like to highlight: we should be criticizing ourselves as well. Yes, everybody has responsibility. We have responsibilities as investors, and making these projects bankable, feasible would also involve the banking sector and the financial sector. But of course, we need some international standards to be followed in developing the projects. Also, for concluding the contracts, I mean, there should be some keen approach into the preparation of the contracts, and I think we should be improving ourselves as well into the way that we are contracting our business. I think all of these aspects will need to be thoroughly elaborated by the relevant parties and improved by all the relevant parties. One final remark I would like to voice out about the 2012 report. In updating that report, we've started a new process of updating the report in TWEC. If you can reach me or someone else from TWEC, maybe you can just give your opinions to us about these subtitles, or maybe something else that you would consider relevant. Our objective is to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible, to hear them into what they have to say into that debate. And at the end of the day, I think we'll find a roadmap which will be beneficial to all of us, including the public, private banks, and all the other stakeholders, so we can take the necessary lessons out of that. Thank you.
Biz de teşekkür ederiz. Vakit kaybetmeden
Without losing time, I would like to move on to the next speaker, Aysun Özen Tacer. She is from Deloitte, Turkey, manager of the Energy and Natural Resources Group. Renewable Energy Action Plan was mentioned in the morning session. Deloitte was a party to that. Therefore, I will try to elaborate as to how we can achieve 20 gigawatts target by 2023. The Ministry of Energy has a strategic plan for 2015 to 2019. Therefore, we have been elaborating as to the question how. This presentation will not be a reflection of the roadmap or the strategic papers of the Ministry of Energy or the other authorities. It's totally the individual corporate opinion of Deloitte. Now, the figures we've been following from the morning session, we know about the figures now, more or less. But starting to discuss what should be done, I would like to remind you where are we and how are we heading, into which direction. Since 2009, we have been progressing, I mean, at a normal pace I have today. It's not very optimistic, but it's not very pessimistic. We still have a very long way to go after 3,483 megawatts. But we have 8 gigawatts, almost 8,000 megawatts of the project stock. But just a minority of this, I mean, we are just speaking about the applications. But within those applications, maybe 600, 700 megawatts could only be realized. This is underperformance, if you just think about it that way. But for the first 9 months of the year, it's 700 plus megawatts. Probably will be reaching almost 1,000 megawatts closing the year 2014. But as reflected in the previous talks, how sustainable is this level? That's the critical question to ask. Are we in the position of achieving these 1,000 megawatts? If we can do it, of course, there are different opportunities out there for, of course, reaching out to that target in terms of sustainability. It's not a very long history that the wind power plants go back in Turkey, but those November the 1st, 2007 applications have gone through a lot in Turkey, as you would appreciate. Firstly, when the game was first started, the right to connection would be tendered out. That really remained unknown to the sector, and that came long after the process, and the processes took some time. Both the public and the investors learned many things on the way. There were no obligations for 1 year measurement then came along. About permits of utilization of the fields, and particularly for the forest rentals, a lot changed that would have an impact on the feasibilities. I mean, you know all these processes, we've lived through them. I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but thank God that May the 2nd, 2014 syndrome did not have a lot of impact over majority of the power plants, but I think that's a positive aspect to it, as you would try to see. There are three things, I mean, three limitations that would be on the forefront. The first thing is we cannot get connected to the grid easily. That's the very first physical limitations, connectivity. Just from that reason, we can get collective applications, tenders, and in those tenders, we have to say that we agree in paying some contribution fees, and we don't have the chance of applying from the authorities that we're willing to. But in that roadmap, of course, improving the connectivity, I think, is the #1 priority. And the second thing is we don't have the chance of setting up power plants anywhere that we'd like to. There are some administrative and legal limitations. Agricultural fields do have problems, protective sites, and the olive yards. You know, there are minuses and pluses of everything that would have an impact into our lives. There is that statement that environmental impact assessment is not a prerequisite, but there is the request of the environmental impact assessment certificates being asked. But it's very environmentalist, but still we are just being bound with many limitations that emerge from the environmental constraints. Plus, there might be some financial limitations. We might not have the best feasibility. I mean, we have many limitations from the contributions and the figures that are payable from the forest rentals and everything that would have an impact into our feasibilities. And of course, there are some aspects that are uncontrollable, which might eventually have an impact into fundability. But we think that 20 gigawatts by 2023 takes a collective effort. The sector itself is not merely the public or the private sector. Funders and equipment manufacturers, investors are into that. If that's a national target, that would probably take a cooperation into achieving that. That's our perspective. So everybody should understand the roles and the distribution of the roles. And we've seen that, first, the role of the public can be summed up in three main aspects. Of course, there are responsibilities about the physical and the technical infrastructure, administrative processes, plus the commercial opportunities. And there are things that the public can do to improve those three aspects. #1, I think, should be the grid. It just makes sense if you put grid into the position #1. I mean, we need more renewable integratability into the infrastructure. If we can achieve that, I think there is a brand new world waiting for us. At any moment of time, the investors should have the chance of applying for connectivity or any other substation. I think these are the things that can make the world much better for the wind energy plants. I think there will be someday where the format of the tenders will be quite different for connectivity. I mean, maybe it will be something beyond tenders. So we'll have such a strong grid that everyone can connect to it if they're willing to. And I think that the TWEC has nice and very good initiatives into that. Of course, there are technological investments that can be done in balancing the system. And I think the grid can be strengthened in different ways where this will no longer be a dream, because when you take a look at, for instance, Spain, a wind capacity of 40 gigawatts was easily balanced and achieved without interrupting anyone, allowing for the application of any applicant at any time. So it's doable, and at least we know that. And here, of course, the central production forecast structures, if these are used for supporting, I think that's doable for Turkey as well. I think it's a bleeding wound when it comes to measurement. What can be done in that? and there is one thing that's just in the forefront, particularly for very small plants that can be connected. I mean, it's not for 50 or 100 megawatts. That's not very easy jump to do this. But even for the small-scaled plants, I mean, here and there, measuring at a close distance to each other, I think this can be prevented into a structure that is viable. Central measurements can be done, or different synergies can be created. But about measurements, I think really, for creating a scale economy, I think that that's also to the benefit of all this parties. Taking a look at these administrative processes, we have come to the point that there should be an opinion received from 28 different parties. I mean, it's not a world record. There were some countries with 37 parties, but I mean, you need a multi-partite process to complete for applying for the permits. I think there are attempts to minimize or optimize the processes by the Renewable Energy Directorate. There might be different initiatives. We can imagine a one-stop shop where everyone can just make their applications from a single place, but it's been long enough sometimes that we cannot get a response from the public authorities. I mean, we can get some kind of a structure where we can dream maximum 10 days of feedback time. This is doable. I mean, there are places in the world that can do it. Maybe we can optimize the administrative processes by being more creative. The authorities do have different perspectives. I mean, the Ministry of Agriculture might have a very different perspective than the Ministry of Energy, than the Ministry of Forestry. But of course, we need a common language, I think, among the public authorities. We need more coordination. And by way of this coordination, we might facilitate the permit processes. Plus, it's a national target at the end of the day. I mean, 20,000 megawatts of a target should also be the target of the Ministry of Agriculture on a macro scale, or should be a target for the Ministry of Forestry as well. Therefore, we should look from that window to be more coordinated, and it's not just the Ministry of Energy to spend efforts into that. As for the commercial opportunities, of course, we've been speaking about 7.3 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour, but everybody had different expectations probably coming up with this. I mean, this should be higher, and it should not be dollars but euros. I mean, there are many people, many different opinions, I think, but if the public finance system in Turkey makes this option, then it's, I mean, another option to go for it. I mean, I think it should be interpreted from the financial perspective. Rather than interpreting on this, I think we should take 7.3 as a data and just work on that. Maybe we can just speak about how we can diversify the subsidies on different scales. In average, we have 7.3 cents, but maybe for higher capacities, like 100 megawatts, we can have lower levels, or we can have higher tariffs just to as an incentive for these major projects. Maybe we can diversify the way that we are subsidizing depending on the geographical location, for instance, and this should be also debatable. Intraday is a very nice, I think, practice. It's life-saving for wind. It's a very important commercial alternative. In the previous session, there was some discussion about balancing and reconciliation regulation, putting wind into a more disadvantageous position. Intraday market may just be a compensation mechanism for this because you can make forecasts of production on a shorter period of time where you can enter daily production programs. Intraday market is being tested now. I don't know, or we don't know when exactly it will be practical in Turkey, but when it does, I think it will be a very nice environment in Turkey. On the consumer side, there is a huge interest, I think, and we observe this. Even in the entries of the shopping malls, you can see some posts saying that this facility uses a renewable energy. But there is no mechanism for evidencing it. Solar or wind are not considered as two different products, and maybe we can find a certification system where we have good examples in Europe, particularly. This certification system might contribute to differentiating the products. I think it's just very important to say that. I mean, these products have been produced by using wind energy. On the consumer side, we need some kind of consent, I think, which will open up a totally new universe. I also would like to speak briefly about joint efforts, I mean, collaboration of the investors and the public. Maybe it's not possible with the existing legal infrastructure, but I think it's worth thinking on. How can we have more cooperation between the public and the investors? How can the investors among themselves cooperate to a better scale economy? We have a legal infrastructure that makes it possible for the investors to cooperate. I think that can open up a window. And there were similarities in Mustafa's presentation, so I'm not going to get into the details, but just as an idea, uniting the demands and productions may be usable. This might be meaningful for small investors because the world of the small investors, I think, is challenging for what we have in the legislation. So bringing them together to create a scale economy, I think that's an opportunity that's still out there. Plus the measurements, especially for small-scale plants, if we can just re-regulate the situation in that direction, that might be an advantage. We also have a regulation and very nice opportunities as to the renewables, and also putting them in life is quite critical, I think, for small-scale plants. And these kind of legal backgrounds maybe, I think, improved, and I think we would have an extra benefit into what we are thinking for the future. Okay, I will be wrapping up very quickly. As the case is for the measurements, I think for the permits, environmental impact assessment reports, there might be some particular regulations for this creating a scale economy for small-scale investors. Okay, then I will be brief about the role of the investors, but I have to say that unfortunately investors are not very rational. You might just go back to the figures because the figures are still valid for connectivity. I mean, for connectivity tenders, there might be significantly irrational contribution fees being paid by the investors. The investors are consenting to pay that. Hopefully, this will not be the case in the coming tenders, therefore will not be putting the feasibilities at stake. I think that should be the perspective of the investors. But that's the last slide. It's a summary. From the advisors to the funders. Of course, there are many roles, many parts to be played by everyone. If we all undertake our responsibilities, I think it's not a dream to achieve that target. But one thing, we have an annual increase of 1 gigawatts. I think that might be an opportunity for equipment manufacturers. I think we can just open up new doors if we look from that window. Thank you.
Biz teşekkür ederiz.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to the next speaker. Now, I also would like to say that there is a work that is on the way for certification of electricity that is being generated by renewable energy. And this one is just to update you that in a very short period of time, we'll have the chance of getting those certification processes in place. I mean, even for 1 megawatts of energy that is generated from renewables, there will be a certification that the producers will have at hand, which will be displayable. I mean, people will be able to demonstrate that. Once it's concluded, probably, I think that will be an advantage also for the sector. Thank you, Aysun. The last speaker of the session will be Mustafa Çalışkan, and he is from our Directorate General, from the DG of Renewable Energy, and he is a person who has been dealing with wind for quite a long period of time. I don't know if he'll do a standard presentation or a wrap-up of what has been discussed so far. I don't know. Of course, we'll see about that. I will try to put the picture on the table. I will try to elaborate on the problems that are being voiced out by the industry. And I'll try to give you a brief glance as to what these problems, these challenges are. Probably we do have our own mistakes, but you might also ask questions at the end of the session, so at least we can have a better look into our problems. A lot has been said, but I would like to paint a general picture. It's 87% of the global energy produced in the world by renewables, mostly hydro plants. But in the coming years, throughout the globe, the amount of the electricity energy out of renewables will be more stable. But still, there will be more demands for wind and other renewables, 87%. But today 8% is from renewables, and out of this 8%, 12.4 is wind. How about the situation in Turkey? We have various facilities producing electricity energy with a total installed capacity of 67 gigawatts, and natural gas, you can see, is the lead, and it's just 5% for wind. In the electricity generation, the share, as discussed previously, is 3.17 accurately of wind. Now, 67,000 megawatts of installed capacity is there, but it's only 11,000 megawatts for renewables, mainly hydro. It's 62% of all the renewables. As I said before, we have 11 gigawatts capacity, and when you take a look at the wind, its share is small now. We keep mentioning about the 2023 targets. 20 gigawatts of wind power plants we are targeting for 2023. Then the total installed capacity will be roughly 125 gigawatts, and 1/6 of it will belong to wind. Electricity generation and consumption perspective would indicate that today 250 terawatts of consumption will correspond to 430,000 terawatts per hour, and the share of wind will be at least 50,000 of 50 thousand kilowatt hours will be from wind, according to our estimations. Okay, this is the national target, 20,000 megawatts, and as of today, we have 3,500 installed capacity. That remains 16,500 megawatts of capacity that still needs to be built. Roughly speaking, we need 1,800 megawatts of capacity that would be added into the picture. That's scary as a target, I have to say. Looking back into the history, if you depend on the statistical info, that really seems challenging, but why not? The targets are ambitious, but the potential is high as well. But in addition to that, there is a high appetite from investors, because we have many investors willing to invest into the sector. Therefore, for us to achieve those targets, the investors will need to be given an investment environment which is facilitated, supported by us. Of course, 48,000 megawatts of potential is there, according to the Wind Atlas, and we're speaking about approximately 48,000 megawatts. But as you can see here, we're speaking about the levels, of course, of the wind speed. Considering the existing technologies of wind, class 2, class 3 turbines, even if these are used, the 6.5, 5.5 winds are feasible, then there is no problem in terms of the capacity. And this may be up to 47,000 or even more. What is important to have a favorable environment for investment and also to attract the investors. As discussed, we have an installed capacity of 3.5 gigawatts, and we have 9 years before 2023 and 16.5 gigawatts of additional capacity needed. But that will not just be for the licensed plants, but you know that we have other plants that might be joining the picture. Together with those up to 1 gigawatts, we can reach this capacity, and we should be reaching that capacity. In the past, in average, every year, 500 to 600 megawatts of wind power plants were commissioned. So we have approximately this according to the statistics, but we should be accelerating ourselves into the way that we are doing business, and we're all aware of this. Do we have a project stock then? We have 16 gigawatts that remains to be fulfilled, but what's the existing situation? We have about 249 licensed projects running in Turkey, and about 85 of them are in operation. The rest are in the pre-construction phase, some being constructed, but their total capacity would correspond to almost 10 gigawatts of project stock. And we have unlicensed applications, and most of these unlicensed applications are mostly solar. But in the wind as well, we have 154 megawatts of application that were called also for tender. And as you all know, in April 2015, and on top of the 10 gigawatts, there will be an extra 3,000 megawatts licensed. And in the coming process, as you would appreciate, there will be another 3,000 megawatts of a facility that will be licensed. Both the licensed projects plus the coming potential for Turkey, when you map down Turkey for 2015, this is the picture that is out there. And you will see that there are many measurements that are just comparable to each other, and the total is 1,396. So quite likely there will be more than 1,300 license applications that will be there, both on the public side and the investors. Yes, the investors do need a foreseeable environment to invest. Therefore, some laws and regulations plus circulars were prepared. You know, we have 2 laws and regulations in place. Both the Ministry and the Electricity Market Board do have some announcements which have altogether made the sector quite prepared. But so as to have more accelerated progress into the projects, we need stability, economical and political stability, plus another thing that the investors are seeking are the subsidies and tax facilitations. These 3 pillars, I think, are no problem. In Turkey, we have, in terms of the investment environment, we don't have any major problem. Turkey is a very favorable country now for investments. Therefore, I don't think that in the coming period there will be some negativity. Plus, I have to say that this additional 16 gigawatts of a capacity will have initial investment cost up to 16 billion euros, almost. Calculating 1 gigawatts with 1 billion euro. It's this amount. So it's not possible to find just local money, but we need international money and some investment into that. So we have to consider how, the economical stability of the country so that we can attract more investors internationally. Speaking of a capacity of 16 gigawatts, we're speaking about roughly 11 billion cubic meters of natural gas will not be imported, so it'll be a contribution to your current deficit. Money-wise, you'll be speaking about $4 billion every year that will not be paid. 16 gigawatts of plants will provide almost 70% of the electricity needs of Istanbul. And more importantly, indigenous production will be increasing incredibly. But there is an investment process, which is a problematic process, licensing of the licensing permits. And the investors are always complaining about these processes, I have to say. But basically, we are speaking about administrative, legislative problems. I don't know. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but for reviewing and assessing the license application, technical assessment and competition may also take some time, which can cause some delays. I think that's a loss of time, and that was the case in 2007. There were 700 plus license applications, and it took really a very long time for technical assessments, review, and everything. We all know about that. Another problem is there are some responsibilities that are just assigned to the authorities, which should be irrelevant. For instance, there are some responsibilities for wind measurements or the electricity market regulatory board. I mean, there were different approvals for measurements, which they concluded that it would be fitting to the standards. But we see on the map that majority of the measurement stations are not very much done in the licensed fields. So eventually, we have to solve this problem this way or another. But I think it's cumbersome. So it's irrelevant authorities who might be involved in the process. That's problematic for us. Another very frequent complaint that you have been raising to us is the public development plans approval process. There are almost 30 authorities that will need to give approval, which is a cumbersome and really problematic process. Another thing is for assessing the applications, there might be differences in terms of the applications of authorities in different geographical locations, where the different locations will have different approaches. Also, the distance of the distance from the turbines mostly are not defined in the legislation with criteria. Expropriation, allocation, and usufruct rights are quite problematic in terms of the time that they take. Also, for emergency expropriation decisions, there can be some lawsuits that can be brought up. Plus, this might be problematic considering the fact that the Council of State also might be involved in the process. Also, turbine interaction analysis might take long time that will cause delays in reporting. Another thing is for licensed projects within the power plant sites, there can be some unlicensed applications, and the calls for tenders will again be given for unlicensed plants, which will be the case for the coming period, for instance. Therefore, before coming to April, we need to solve this issue on the public side, what kind of a path that will be followed that should be absolute. Especially for the unlicensed projects, the time that is being allowed for the development plans is limited with 3 months, according to the regulation enacted by the Electricity Market Authority, which was a problem because the time is considered to be a short time. And there are problems of the investors, of course. I mean, problems due to the investors. A license holder, an investor, would like to make some changes in the capacity increase. They apply to the Electricity Market Board, and upon this technical assessment, we are provided with the report. And there are some gaps in like for instance, the CD or the map is missing in the file, or the turbine coordinates might differ on the map and on the documentation. So these kind of problems may be detected, which eventually would cause some delays because we'll have to inform the electricity market boards, and then they will be turning back to the investor. In average, how long that takes? It's about 2.5 to 3 months in average, all of these files coming in and out. As discussed in the morning about the licensed wind power plants and the mines being on the same site, of course, there can be opportunities, but eventually the investors will be losing time here. Can you wrap up, please? And the most important problem is the forestry. There is the circular of the Ministry of Forestry about the forest sites for the licensed wind power plants, and the forest licenses will not be given this according to this decision. Within the scope of the same circular, forest rental fees have been tremendously increased. This would create some financial burden. If the public development works will be sustained through the Ministry of Urban Affairs, there will be a share that will be taken from the investors. If it's like 13 turbines, they will have to pay for 2.4 million Turkish liras, corresponding to 1 megawatts of the energy output for the facility cost. There are many wind measurement sites, but these are not the ideal sites. Also, under the unlicensed practices regulation, the capacity is limited with 1 megawatts, and also the wind potential and the wind regimen of Turkey, when it's analyzed, is class 2 and 3s mostly. Therefore, maybe we'll have to increase that 1 megawatt power for wind turbines, I think. There might be some errors in projects, and this information may also be prolonging the time. For the method of licensing, I think that should be changed, in my opinion, rather than just maybe we can have the competition first and then the technical assessment, and then maybe we can have, for instance, in the hydro plants, the different model can be pursued other than the winds. So this kind of modifications may be preferred, because otherwise, as per the law, we will be receiving applications for licensing every year, and I mean, it took many years for 700 applications, and imagine what will happen this time. I think the renewable energy cooperatives may be a mature concept. I mean, people with small capitals may get together for starting these kind of facilities or plants, but there are some problems in terms of connectivity. I think these problems can be overcome. If we can overcome these problems, I think that we'll have a very important progress. One-stop shop, as mentioned by Aysun, maybe it's the Renewable Energy Director General who will be coordinating with all the authorities, so we can coordinate all the relevant authorities, follow the projects, and about that, of course, we have some works, and that should be sustained, in my opinion. And another thing is there are wind measurements everywhere, one to each other, mostly. Maybe it should be the responsibility of the Director General, where we will be able to standardize this or organize this, and where we can just lead the process of making measurements. Currently, 1,400 wind measurements are being made, but a lot of money is being spent. I mean, up to 30 million euros being spent for international parties. Let me conclude here then. I mean, thank you.
Bu vesileyle birkaç nokta.
Taking that opportunity, I would like to conclude by highlighting some of the aspects raised. As Mustafa stated in the morning session, the president of the Electricity Market Board also emphasized that this upcoming April applications for licensing, I think, will be key, and therefore we have been reviewing and revising also the processes. We have made some recommendations, and our colleagues are working with the board. I think we'll have a proper working mechanism that will emerge for the next April. In the past, there were some problems that caused a lot of delays in time. Probably we won't have that experience once again, hopefully. About the Ministry of Forestry, about their attitudes that really had a negative impact onto the investments was criticized. I mean, was quite clearly criticized by Mr. Minister in the presence of 9 ministers. That was really very sharp criticism, I have to say. I would guess that the government will take some improvement into that. Probably it'll take some time and process when the Ministry of Forestry will modify its attitudes, I would assume. Of course, about the targets for 2023. Without modifying the targets of 2023, we can consider this as an interim, maybe target. This is something that we've been discussing with my colleagues at the ministry from time to time. This might need some kind of strategic work before the ministries, and that's what we can do. Because at the end of the day, I would think that it's not minimizing the targets that will hinder our efforts, but revising maybe what can be done into that process. About the energy cooperatives, yes, that's something that we're thinking about, but there is still a lot that will need to be done. We have to strengthen the infrastructure for that, of course. In terms of the connectivity, we need a new planning.
Panelist arkadaşlarımıza yeni
Once again would like to thank to the panelists, and if there is any questions, just a couple of questions. We have just a couple of more minutes, I guess. Also refer the question. I mean, also tell the person who you're asking. Hüseyin Koç. My question is to anyone, to any of the panelists. I mean, it could be anyone, except for me. You know, I'm the moderator. Actually, I actually have observed 2 things in here. The first one is about the local production, local manufacturing, and the second thing is that how we can have access to the 2023 visions. And if you're asking me if we really can possibly have a local generation, a local manufacturing, maybe we can have better access to the 2023 vision, and in particular about local manufacturing. The people believe that some big brands to actually come to Turkey and, for example, construct their own facilities and do the production. But if you're asking me, for example, China, Korea, they actually apply something different. And, for example, they did not expect foreign companies to come there. It's just know-how transfer. I mean, they actually use engineering companies for the know-how, and then they continue with the R&D activities. And 5 or 6 years, now they are number 1 in the world. I don't know why. I mean, not people in Turkey are not doing anything like this. I mean, why there is such a technology dependence again? Why not, I mean, having know-how and do the production? I mean, Turkish companies can do this. Maybe 1 or 2 questions again. But I'm sure that anyone, any of the panelists may ask. Maybe we can have a last round again. Any questions? 2 more. I agree. Be please brief because we don't have time. Since 1950s and 60s, we have thermal power plants in Turkey, and we are generating electricity. But still, we have no know-how, even from thermal power plants. I mean, we cannot, with our own technology, we cannot generate it. Just like the wind energy, we're just becoming the markets of the others. We just import the technology and nothing else. I mean, with such a way we can reach these goals, and we can even go beyond those goals. But as it is already discussed, thinking about natural gas and the others, we just will be not dependent on energy resources. We'll be dependent on technology of the others, because even we are not doing it for thermal power plants, so nothing will change for wind. Yes, please. It is actually mostly one-stop office idea. You know, as we live in Turkey, we are okay, for example, with getting 30 authorizations from 30 different places. There's a need for a one-stop approach. One of the 30 stops there can actually prevent our project. It could be the highways authority or the railway authority. Therefore, my question is with regards to one-stop office in the field of renewable energy, at least. Is it possible to do anything like this? I don't know. Maybe the ministry can be in charge of giving the authorizations as a whole. Any other?
Duyabiliyor musunuz Ahmet?
I have actually a question to the energy company. In April, there will be some applications, and in these applications, do we have to wait for some new technical criteria, or is it everything that's already in the legislation? For example, in solar energy, you, for example, include some other criteria later. For example, having it at a certain site, and so in wind. There was also, for example, the power intensity issues. I mean, will there be new criterion to be, or is it just, I mean, can we get ready for the applications as it already is? It would be nice if we have a colleague from the energy market board. As much as I know, there will be no new administrative procedure. I don't think so. I don't know, maybe Mustafa. If not,
Bir son olarak
I'm metallurgic engineer. My question is to Mustafa. I have two questions actually. I mean, will you be announcing the capacities also in the upcoming years? And my second question is for 2015 applications. You know, 1,400 project locations identified for 2015. Especially for the measuring stations which are not appropriate. What I mean is, what is going to happen to them? For example, there are 4 or 5 applications in, for example, they have their measuring station at a certain location and the other has a leasing right on this, but it is not representative for the site because these are the things that might affect the feasibility in the future. Especially for these metering stations, what would you say? Let's skip this question. I mean, Mustafa, also you should not answer to this question because it is an agenda, a topic on the Energy Market Regulatory Board. We had an idea in our minds and we shared it with the Regulatory Board. So let's not answer that question. I don't know, maybe this is something different from what we think, so I mean, it would be wrong. We cannot comment on this. But we are, of course, sharing this. Let's start with Hakan. Just 3 minutes for each. I mean, also answer to the questions and your final words, please. China is interesting. I mean, we're speaking about such a country that every month the population is increasing 1 million, and they can build a train that can go in double speed of the train in the United States. So, for example, between 100 to 100 megawatts, they actually had 100,000 wind turbines already. And in 2006, the first time that they introduced the wind energy, 70% local share was a must in China. They have very huge technical capabilities. You all know, they know what a gearbox is. I mean, they've already applied it in some other places and so on. So, of course, it was much easier for them to develop their own technology. Of course, they are learning. I mean, 20 gigawatt that they actually commissioned. It is 54 megawatt a day. Therefore, they are in a different dimension, and they have different dynamics. Technology development is an issue on its own. Denmark, for example, they developed the turbines. And in 1905, they established the very first institute in Denmark, and especially so it is 1905 to train the first technician. And until 1970s, they have any type of wind turbine. But in the oil crisis, and at that time, it was by 75% of an import that so as to meet the energy demand. I mean, very similar to us now, 40 years ago. And in 30 years' time, they create a new industry. It's not something that happens in a fortnight. There are, of course, nice things in our country, and we could do a lot. It is not space, actually. It's not space technology that we're talking about in here. But what is important in here, the ability to manufacture it and in a quality that can resist for 25, 30 years, and also in a way that you can sell it outside the country. The reason is that I'm not saying we cannot do it in Turkey, but especially as the countries that developed this later. When I was studying at the university, it was in 1986, I guess, that they had the first wind turbine, Turkish manufactured wind turbine, manufactured. And it was in the garden, actually. I don't know, maybe we should have built upon it. So, I don't want to repeat myself, but so if we really wanted to do something about this, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not, we don't have to do the wind turbine from scratch. I mean, there are 8,000 different pieces of material, and we are actually producing them all and exporting a lot of them. I don't know, maybe it would be nice to start from there. And I'm sure that 10, 15 years ahead of us, I don't know, maybe sooner, I'm sure we'll have more added value.
Yalnız çok kısa bir dakika. Hemen keseceğim bir dakika. Ondan sonra kendi aramızda konuşabiliriz.
You can discuss it later. I mean, because we don't have time. What I mean is that why Turkey is not doing as China did. I mean, 5 years ago, what China did 5 years ago is now for Turkey. What I'm trying to say is that looking at the technology used by China, it is the German company. And I mean, it's that German company using it. And actually, they're trying to find a partner company to manufacture turbine here in Turkey. So if you're interested, contact me. They are looking for local partners. Maybe something additional for Hüseyin. Why we expect, I mean, why the foreigners are doing it here. One of our shareholders is Sabancı. Sabancı is coming to me. Why? For market share, of course. You know, it is now 600, 700 megawatts, but Siemens with Vestas, with GE, with Siemens, only in that country will not bother competing with them. In a place where they do 500, 800 megawatt, we're speaking about 800 million euros. And even if you get, for example, 10% of it, it is $80 million or euros that you have. For myself, I mean, I will raise the bar. And of course, to do so, you have to have a larger market share. For example, I said 5 towers and 2 blade manufacturers and also turbine manufacturers. We already have them. I mean, something is being done in Turkey. And especially it is other than the national WPP projects, not just large scale. I mean, it's just in small scale manufacturing. The larger the share of the market is, also the big manufacturers will be a part of this. The other one is that we not only need to grow, but we also need it to be fast. And we also have to prove that it is sustainable. I mean, I don't know, maybe even if we keep it at that, I mean, even if we sustain the market level, they will continue to invest. But we don't know. I mean, just do not look only the last 5 years and saying why nobody is investing. It's cruel to say that, if you ask me, because for the subcomponents we have manufacturing for tower, for blade, but for smaller components, we have the supply chain and the large-scale manufacturers are also part of it. I hope that there'll be more steps to be taken, and I hope there'll be some other big manufacturers to come forward. You actually asked the question, and I also wonder a lot about the answer. I hope it will not be known 15 days before the tender, because that happened especially for solar energy. They have changed the technical specifications 9 days in advance to the submission of the proposals. And about the metering stations you mentioned, as a developer, I would say, I mean, the project development is given 16 months, and having 12 months must be for metering and the other for audit, and it's just a couple of months left, only 3 months maybe. How are you going to find a proper site in 3 months and get authorization from the public authorities and make sure that it is representative and do the metering? Give me 1 year, so I'll do properly. I mean, as for 3 months, I have to do it immediately because I want to do investment. About one-stop office, I think the renewable energy, the DG for renewable energy is represented by Mustafa, so you better answer that. Let's start with the most simple question. You know, this capacity is something to do with the Turkish Electricity Generation Incorporation. At Blue Hall, we have a session. Go and ask Ibrahim tomorrow. He's the most authorized person. The second thing is whether you don't want to come across with surprises, I know. And you know, there is a regulation on technical assessment, and with this regulation, we have actually changed the way for identifying the site. For example, it was like having some closed polygons as the power plant site, and it's just going to be one only. We have revised it. The metering station should be within the power plant area. So the investor, of course, you actually will have the coordinates, and then for your power plant, there's nothing changed. I mean, it's been already changed. I mean, the one that the investors are interested is just to identify the coordinates and so on. It's already known. And what you have to do is identify the locations of the turbines, and you will have the corner coordinates. That's it, and then you can prepare for your application. About the power intensity, yeah, there are two different things. The one is actually the power intensity per 1 square kilometer, the number of the facilities. It is 0.6 in the regulation. Whether to increase it or not, I mean, in the draft we have just written these types of things, but some said 3 is too much. Some said 1.5. It is 0.6 now. I mean, I know for you to be able to apply in April, I mean, thinking about to install all the existing capacity, 0.6 will book, it will be mostly 1.5 and over. I mean, of course, in particular, when we consider the connection, it looks like there's no problem with that. About your questions, your one-stop office. Let's the Renewable Energy Directorate General to be one-stop office. So there will be only one single authority. I mean, rather than applying for 30 different offices and so on. You still can go and provide information to our DG, but let's assume I'm the one stop office and something happens at the Ministry of Forestry, for example. What I can do is that I actually can be able to follow each and every project. It's probably would facilitate and speed up the process. And but there's a need to make a change in the legislation. At least as a public body, will be coordinating with the other public agencies. I mean, especially for getting the authorization and so on, it would be nice. And the other thing is that, now you mentioned about technical assessment. Maybe at that point, when we receive the turbine coordinates, if, for example, I know that this is already a protected area, maybe I should not even go there for a technical assessment. Because especially after receiving the preliminary permit, it will come up later. I mean, yes, right. We can do it. For example, the interaction analysis, you're going to the Scientific Council of Turkey, they prepare a report, and I don't know whether it would be possible, but it is conditional. It's not possible to erect these turbines. I don't know, maybe rather than going to the Turkish Scientific Council, maybe we can have a database. And maybe from the very beginning I can say, no, you cannot have your turbine there. But April 2015 is closed. And I'm sure you are at the point of preparing your files. But in terms of the method, there's nothing wrong. It's okay. Any other? Thank you. Thank you. That's the end of the session. If you have any question, ask later. I would like to thank to the panelists, and I'll be presenting their certificates.